you to the survey.
Perfect. So just quickly wait for this last person. So next slide, we've got our little first question, because I changed it quickly while we were talking because James gave me this idea as we were talking. It's a very easy question for most of you to answer. If we look at the first question, how many languages can you actually speak? Most people can speak one, some people can speak two, maybe some three or more. Let's see what happens. Because now the beauty of these kinds of Menti surveys is that we can actually see the live. Hey.
It's grape.
It's grapes. The grapes have won it. I think the grapes have actually won it. I love how there's only one at one.
Mean?
That makes me really happy. That's only one at one.
One at one.
It's like it was supposed to. Only one is only one. Good. So that's literally how the Menti will work. And as Dominique does her the talk, we will have these Menti questions pop up and everyone can see the answers as we progress. If you have any questions, please write it in the chat during, if anything, and Dominique will probably say whether she would like questions during or all afterwards, but I think we'll see what happens. But let's keep it good. We've all got, I think everyone's used Microsoft Teams by now. If you have a question, raise a hand, we'll see what happens, either that or write it in the chat and we will coordinate from there. And with that, I give it back to you, Stefan. Cool. Back to the studio.
Yeah, very briefly. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our today's speaker. Hi, Dominique. Dominique is a Global Chief Revenue Officer at Seprotec with more than 15 years of experience in localization, AI-enabled workflows, and organizational transformation. Dominique helps companies turn multilingual complexity into scalable, practical solutions. Today, she will show us how to move beyond the idea of perfect translation and define quality based on risk, purpose, and real business needs. So, Dominique, without further ado, the stage is yours.
Okay, so everyone, hello. Thanks for having me. I prepared a couple of slides. I don't want to cause death by PowerPoint to share here, but I thought it might be nicer to be able to follow with some visuals as well. Come on. Okay, so maybe some words of framing before we start, and thanks Karian and Stefan for the nice introduction and for having me here today. The topic I'll be talking about is quite dear to me, and maybe for those of you who don't know me as of yet, I come from a very long background of being in the lock industry, but when I started off with my education, I actually studied economics. So the framing I'll be using today is quite deeply rooted in economical thesis. And this is also how you should be looking at that topic for today. Maybe as an additional information, I already took up that topic in my thesis, which is almost 20 years ago, where I analyzed the effect of moral hazard in the translation industry. But let's dive into the topic and let's see what it comes up with and shows us for today. So maybe a few words on the company I'm working in. We come from a language services background. We've invested in the topic of machine translation already a decade ago. We moved to empowered AI solutions some 2 to 3 years ago, and we're very good at combining all these three aspects and provide with processes with human in the loop or without. And this is why we as a company identify as a language intelligence partner. In this context, I'll be continuing this story for you. So since I am not a linguist, but I do speak multiple languages, and I actually also grew up in the localization industry, I always had a recurring question that went around our head, and this was how to assess language and if this is even possible. So what actually always comes back in the discussions I'm having with clients and experts is that language is situational and it's context and audience dependent, right? So at the end, what comes out of this is that it can be formally correct and still miss its goals. And this is actually one of the recurring topics I've been seeing in the past. I think somebody has their mic on. I'm not sure. Yeah, thanks, Karian. This is something that, like, always struck me as something that needs a bit deeper analysis. So I think it was like approximately 10 years ago, I was at a Taos conference and somebody asked me, oh yeah, how do you define quality in a linguistic context? And I said, well, actually, I don't define it at all, because the problem that we're having is not the quality itself. It's defining the expectations. So I thought that this little picture here does show it quite nicely. That well, obviously, it was expected to picture the flag of the Finnish state here, but there's also another Finnish flag. So maybe somebody should have talked about the expectations in this little exercise here a little bit deeper. And I think this is mostly at the core of the problems we're seeing when we're trying to define quality in language. Because of that question, we brought a little question to you today, which is, how good were you at spelling and grammar in school? So that maybe you can tell us how well you were yourself able to assess linguistic quality.
So the survey should have updated now, and you see the live results here.
Very nice. I managed. Excellent. Yeah, I was already expecting that this session is going to be full of people who are really good at school in grammar and spelling. By the way, I was horrible. It was one of my worst nightmares. I only managed after grade 8 to have proper spelling and grammar. I was good at math.
So were you the cat ate my homework?
I was, yeah, or the do the homework, like just before the class started.
Mm.
But I graduated relatively well compared to my performance in primary school. Okay, perfect. So let's go back to the presentation. I'm sorry. So this is really fit for purpose presenting here, because we weren't able to do it any nicer for you guys. Okay. Good. So if we talk about the topic of expectations and how we all bring this together into a risk assessment and try to define how we want to, carry on defining quality or service levels in the future, since I was unaware of how deeply everybody was informed about the different abbreviations, I just included this really quickly. So the first 3 should be a household abbreviation for everybody, and the AQE and APE stands for automatic quality estimation and automatic post-editing. So those are 2 workflows that you can see coming up more frequently in the age of AI. So this is usually solutions that are trained specifically to do a quality estimation or evaluation or a automatic post-editing. Both solutions are available in our tools, but there's also alternative tools out there who are able to do that. And it's going to be important for the rest of the presentation just to understand this. In case somebody has trouble understanding this, I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. But there's another term that is very, very important and needs clarification much more than those acronyms I just showed you. And this is the term of quality. So the definition I looked up for you here is actually from the Gabler lexicon, which is a German-based lexicon. So bear with me, I'm not a translator. And I paraphrase this slightly. But you can see here that the people who designed this definition already took into consideration that it's an alignment of performance with expectations. Okay, so any quality that we are defining is always in relationship to whomever is using a certain good when we define quality in terms of economics. So we always have to take into consideration the customer. If the customer is not the user, then also the user, so the consumer or the producer, the retailers and the manufacturers. So at the end of the day, any person who is part of the ecosystem of creating a certain good or service is required to add an element to the definition of the expectation. And there's some goods where this is really easy to do, right? So if you design a car, for example, there's a lot of parts of that car that can be objectively quantified and then qualified and measured. And this is, well, relatively easy depending on how much money, of course, you want to spend, but it's a doable thing. Whereas the services that we are typically looking at in the localization and translation industry is a service that is around a perceived quality. And as you can see here already in this lexicon, it is listed that the measurement of perceived quality causes problems because it's more difficult to get to a agreeable set of rules when it comes to setting those expectations. Yes. So then if we want to look at fit for purpose, at the end, it's just a subsection of what we've just defined in what we have defined as quality. And that is suitable and good enough to do what it is intended to do, right? So it's not more or less. So for example, a fit for purpose could be an excellent performance without any space for error, which could be, for example, a medical appointment where you get diagnosed and where you don't want anything to go wrong because your life might be threatened by it. So the fit for purpose in, for example, an operation would be that everything is perfect and everybody has sufficient time to do what they need to do in order to get that operation through, and hopefully the patient will end up healthy and living a long, fruitful life afterwards. So it's not less, it's not more. Okay, so if we apply those terms and those definitions I just shared with you to what do we want fit for purpose to look like in a linguistic context or for linguistic content, there's a number of possible goals we can set up here. So first of all, one thing that is usually not being considered when we define linguistic quality is speed, for example. So a goal for our fit for purpose definition could be a certain speed that we need to achieve when we process certain content from one language to the other. Or when we also create that content, right? It's not only about translation itself, it's also around, content creation itself. Then we might want to add clarity and readability. We might want to add precision, depending on how we want to define this precision. This is going to be a topic of the following slides. We want to maybe have a certain level of scalability. Okay, let's say we have to process a certain volume or a certain number of languages. Another fit for purpose goal could also be cost efficiency, right? Because there might be a limit to the budget that is available to get to the goal of where we want to go. So in this respect, what for me it always comes back to is I have these discussions, and also, I'm discussing with my clients and peers these goals, and then somewhere along the line, there's this, for me, never-ending story of the editor editing the editor, editing the editor, editing. So at one point, we need to, define, okay, this is sufficient, this is enough, and we don't need to go into these never-ending cycles of editing. And I think that predefining our goals and being clear around them is necessary to kind of stop that cycle. Okay, so let's jump to the next question before we start going into the deeper analysis of what we can do. Okay, so how familiar are you with quality processes in AI-enabled multilingual translation workflows? So we want to know how expert your level is already. Okay, so we see that the majority has heard about it, but not tried it yet. Come on, there's much more people in this call. 40, we need to get a better result here.
At any stage, you can jump in using the link provided in the chat, and you will be immediately at the question asked.
Yeah, I think we give it another minute, and I might be able to answer the question in the chat. So who defines the fit for purpose level? The client? Yes and no would be my answer. Depends on the context. Yeah, I know. I love this answer. It depends on the context. I would say not solely. Of course, the person paying usually is the person also defining what level of expectations they are having towards a certain content that is being pushed. But at the same time, they might need consultancy on what the fit for purpose really is. So in my experience, it's usually a dance. So my best clients are the ones that listen to me when I tell them, maybe you want that, maybe you don't want that. Okay, so most of our listeners in the audience today have heard about it, but haven't tried it. So this is why you're joining this webinar, I guess. Okay, then let's move on so that you can see a little bit more. Okay, see, I found out how I can not jump back to the not presenting mode.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm already improving quality. Okay, so there's different ways of how you can do that, right? If you think about that problem. When preparing for this presentation, I reflected heavily on what comes first. But because we today have an audience that has already heard about the processes that are typically seen in localization, I started with a little mapping here of what the different processes are. And when we think about the service level assessment, usually what we see is a move from a 100% human workflow, which would be the traditional workflow that we've seen in the last decades, moving on to a workflow that is using both a mix of machine translation and AI, or if you want to count machine translation as AI, then just AI. I'm not going to run you through the whole slide because I guess that you can also read it and it will be shared afterwards. But I mean, historically, what we've moved from is a human translation according to what we call 2I principle. So one human transforming the text from one language to the other, and then maybe at the bottom right corner, we see the AI content creation, let's say maybe without automatic quality estimation. So where we push content directly in multiple languages without doing a transformation from a source text to a target text. So in between all of those different iterations of a potential workflow, we have the possibility to manipulate or define the quality level that we are able to deliver. Maybe one food for thought here, the human translation, maybe according to the 4 or more I principle, might not always be also the one that delivers the highest quality in terms of linguistic output, right? Because human error cannot be excluded fully. So maybe another version of that could be something that will provide you with a more reliable output, depending on how much emphasis and work you put into, curating your data, like your TMS or your machine translation engine or the AI engines that you're using. I want to quote a friend of mine here. The data that we are creating while doing translation is actually data gold, and it can be used to even further improve any kind of output that we are creating. But keep this overview in the back of your minds while I'll walk you through the risk analysis, because this is going to be important to understand how you can actually do risk analysis when you try to define quality. So, what is risk analysis? I've been, you can already deduct from the way I'm walking you through this topic that actually defining some of these terms is important to me personally, but I think also for your thought process and for understanding what is done here, right? So because I couldn't expect everybody to have a similar background as me in economics, I thought it might also be beneficial to talk about this topic or this term of risk analysis. And I'm also aware that this has a cultural implication. While the culture I live in, Germany, is quite open to doing risk analysis and is actually a big part of our cultural experience. I think we're the country with almost the most insurances. I heard yesterday you can get insured for being abducted by an alien. I'm not sure. I didn't check if this is true, but the source was kind of reliable. So I'm just putting it out there. But I am aware that not all cultures take risk analysis as positively as we might do that in Germany. But it's important. It's important to, get to defining service levels, to defining a certain level of expectations we want towards a certain kind of product. And in essence, again, this is paraphrasing from a couple of sources here. We have two main perspectives we can take here into consideration, and I'm sharing two. So the first one is, I think, the most straightforward one, is the scientific perspective. So we have some empirical data that we are collecting. We are thinking about the probability of a certain outcome to come into play. And then we use statistical methods to estimate that likelihood and also the magnitude of adverse events. So anyone who's been through an ISO certification has seen that kind of thought process in action. Specifically when it comes, for example, I guess that most of us know this from data security audits or something like this, where you say, okay, I have to have a certain workflow in place to reduce the likelihood of data being leaked, for example, right? So there's not 100% security that it's not leaked, apart from it being on paper, closed in a safe, and then even then the safe can be, stolen or something like this. And this is how you go through your risk analysis and you say, okay, this is high risk, low risk, and so on and so forth. And most of the time, based then on this scientific perspective, you will add an economic perspective, because you will say, okay, given those uncertainties that I have identified, how high are my financial losses or gains if I, take this step or I don't take this step? And then you do a simple cost-benefit analysis, and you adjust your risk in turn concerning this. So in short, you link the uncertainty that you can scientifically assess with the impact on the value that it will have with you economically, and then you try to take a decision. That's what business leaders do. So how is this applicable to our concrete example? So what I'm sharing here with you is an excerpt of the consultancy I'm doing usually with my clients. The risk categories are quite straightforward. And again, this is an example. You can make this larger or smaller depending on what you're currently looking at. But in essence, what you will define is different levels of risk categories. And maybe concerning those, I might want to give you some different points of view here. Okay, so you have high concerning safety and high concerning regulatory and compliance. So what you say is that if a certain type of content goes into those categories, then you have identified the risk as relatively high if something goes wrong, right? For example, what might not necessarily be a linguistic evaluation, but an evaluation that is nonetheless relevant for the workflow that you can choose in the end. For example, when it comes to safety, you might also have something related to the leaking of data, right? So you might choose a certain workflow that uses certain technologies or specifically doesn't use certain technologies, because you don't only have dimensions that are related to the output of your content, but you also have dimensions that are related to the safety of the data that you are pushing. And then you can go through this whole analysis content by content. This is what I typically suggest clients to be doing, to be very detailed on the different content types that you have. You might even find that within a content creation silo, this is how I call them, right? So you might have different divisions or a certain ecosystem where content is created between, I don't know, customer side divisions, but also agencies who are creating content, that you have different risk categories that will apply to the different content types they are producing, or depending the product types that they are catering to. And you might want to think about the potential workflows that make sense. So if we go, for example, to a low informative risk category, which would typically be maybe knowledge base or release notes, feature descriptions, or like general product information, then you will say, okay, I have a low risk category, I have this content type, and I'd say, you know what, I want it to be error-free, but at the language combinations I'm looking at, which is a dimension that is not added here in this overview, you know, a machine translation and some automated quality assurance with automatic post-editing might be sufficient for this combination here for me in my, you know, analysis. And then something that we usually also do here, because it's also budget relevant, is that we will add, you know, is human involvement something that we want? And in this case, we will say, well, it's low or it's optional. Okay. So this is how you can build and classify risk. And in order for it to not stay as abstract as this one, I've added a little goofy exercise I did with my quality manager, Natasha, some time ago, and we created the perfectly imperfect corporation. You can already see we added an unnecessary blank space here, but this is how we defined this. So we said, for example, if we come back to the example we just had, we have a content type that is internal communication, and the quality expectations, laws and standards that applies here is, well, the main thing is everybody roughly knows what it is about. And then the AQE threshold, that's if you use automatic quality evaluation, is low, right? So if you work with these automatic quality evaluation tools, you can say, okay, I'm going to have a threshold that is very strict or very low, depending on how much you want to push through it. So in this case, we don't have time. Actually, everybody just needs to understand it. So don't flag as many mistakes as you could potentially. And a human in the loop is not necessary unless the CEO might be reading it. Then our goal is actually just to have like a very high speed. We want low cost, and we want to avoid panic. So those those are the elements in our perfectly imperfect cooperation when it comes to internal communication. But if we then go down this whole table and we end up in intellectual property and legal content, which is a content that we also cater to. So actually for us, it's our own business unit. There, if you've ever worked with IP content, you know that there's no room for interpretation. And no creative outbursts are allowed. So actually, this is a content type where every comma is relevant. And in a court of law, these cases have known to happen, right? That it was not decided in your favor because of a missing comma. So here my AQE threshold will be super high because I want him, like even false positives, give me everything, everything that could go wrong. And then for this reason, an human in the loop is absolutely necessary. Maybe exceptions, divorce agreements. And then our goal here is precision, and it should be legislation safe. Okay, so this is how you can then build it. And we on purpose added these a little bit more, flopsy remarks here because this is actually how our clients will come back to us. This is the actual language they're using. And I think it's not stupid to actually add this when you go with a client through this, to use their words that they had for themselves, instead of using some abstract language here to define quality expectation, because in these little details might lie the differentiation that they have concerning those expectations, and which they might not have, right? Okay, so let me think. I think we're jumping to the next question already, right? So if you wanted to conduct a fit-for-purpose analysis, how long would it take your team or company roundabout to complete it? And I'm reading your questions while you're answering this one.
There are a few.
Oh, somebody corrected my English. Yeah, thanks for this one, James. So, of course, I meant the process of two humans reading something. Oh, yeah, revision, review, proofreading. I've seen those terms be thrown around. I know that the ISOs are clear on this. Again, I'm not a linguist. I might not always use the right words, but that's what I just meant, right? That you want your clients to use their own language defining this because they might use different terms that you do. Yeah, James, true. The one about Finnish, that's something I can touch on maybe. Give me a second reading all the others, if we have something that also. Okay, we have a question on use TMS or not. Okay. Okay, so maybe I'll first go to the question on TMSs, and I see this is from Dragos. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. There's a word, yeah, I didn't go into this level of detail. That is true, because otherwise my slides would be, I don't know, I would need 3 monitors for you to read them. There is workflows and some studies as well that show that the use of TMS is not always beneficial to the output. Term bases are good, but we've also seen output where not using the term base gives you better transformation of language. So that's something that needs to be POC'd actually. So there's not one rule to be applied here, Dragos. I hope this answers the question. Okay, but I'll go to the other question. Well, maybe just the one from the Word Hub office. The question is, IFU safety warnings and safety instructions are often interlinked with installation and operation manuals. How can the latter be categorized as lower risk as the first and only requiring strategic human involvement? I'm not sure I understand this one perfectly. So maybe you can try to give me other words for the same question, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, but we've done...
Excuse me, the manuals will be subject to the same safety and accuracy criteria as the actual safety documents. And so it's not going to work to have automatic, not to have human review.
If this is a legal requirement that you have to adhere to as a company when creating this kind of content, then you'll have to go through that and have to, have the budget for it. Or you say, I don't really care, I don't want to spend the money on that, and I'll take the risk. That's the decision of the producing company. If the safety warnings and safety instructions are part of the product that you're delivering, and that's the legal ecosystem that you're operating in, and you have a check on how your workflow concerning that part of your product was handled, then that's something that you will have to do. But that's the decision of whomever is responsible for pushing that output. That's what a risk analysis does, right? So you analyze this risk and you decide, do I want to take it or not? Do I have the money to pay for not going into that risk, or will I go with the risk? Okay, so let me check if I have some more slides for you, and then I see there's a lot of questions. Your bag of questions, I already love it. Okay. So opportunities and risk. So this is something that you might know already. You might have done a SWOT analysis in your life, and this is what you usually should then do after you've assessed the risk. So a risk is, of course, that you have the opportunity costs of time, right? So defining a fit for purpose takes time, and it requires coordination and effort. So you can just go back to whatever ISO are available and work according to them. Then you can kind of ditch the fit for purpose and just continue working as you do. But I see hardly any client doing this currently. But still, it's something that you have to take into consideration, that a proper fit for purpose, again, coming back to the question we just had on the risk that you take when it comes to certain safety documentation, might not be something that you want to take lightly. So if your manager approaches you and says, oh, the language problem is solved and you have to use AI on everything, then a good fit for purpose analysis with a good risk analysis might give you the arguments that you can bring up against management not to get your budget cut in this respect. Then obviously no one size fits all. So a detailed analysis is necessary. And as I just said, all content types should be covered adequately. Then one point that I usually find the most time consuming, and also we can also see this already in the question, this mindset that you have to bring to that exercise. It can be scary for people, right? So it might feel for some like losing control, and defining expectations and requirements is a hard thing, right? It's not something that people can do lightly, and it sometimes requires talking to departments within your company who you have not talked to in the past or you dislike talking to. So it's a process. It's not done from one day to the other. However, what you then, get as an opportunity out of this is that you have a perfect for the purpose workflow that is then agile and flexible. And usually with the clients where we do this successfully with, or who have also done this successfully internally. So some of my clients actually can do this without my help, or without the help of other consultants. For them, it's easier to, first of all, communicate the necessity for budgets and human intervention. And at the same time, they're able to move their processes more quickly into newer workflows where they might add additional automation, additional use of AI and other tools that might be necessary to push the content. Actually, because fit for purpose is kind of self-explanatory, it's not very complicated to roll it out, and it can be used with any existing workflow, right? So it's not something where you actually have to change your internal processes and then do a fit for purpose. You can do it at whatever point in time you want to do it. At the end, if you rethink the definition of quality, this also gives you the possibility to controlling your processes over the output. So it actually gives you more guardianship or ownership of the output that you're creating, both as from a client perspective, but also from a supplier perspective. Okay, so I just wanted to share one last thing with you, which I did like very much when I researched some of the terms. I think this is important for everybody to maybe write down. So this is Ryle and Kruithoff. They have created a lot of papers concerning the measurement of quality and also how quality can be defined. Again, they are both economists, I believe. So this is the hat they're wearing, but at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for whatever we're doing. So they say that quality is consistently meeting the continuously negotiated needs and expectations of customers. So again, this is why fit for purpose makes sense, because it doesn't stay the same over time, right? And in the context of the needs and expectations of other interested parties in ways that create value and satisfactions for all involved. So thanks a lot. I think we have a last question after the elaborations I've made, and I hope I'm on time, Karian and Steffen. Yeah. Perfect.
Perfectly.
So this is our last question for today going your way. And while you're answering that one, I'm going to continue reading all of the questions. Okay, somebody liked my joke about the CEO. It was a joke, by the way. So I don't know if the CEO is important. Maybe he's not. Okay, so this is another one from James. Going from Czech or Slovak to English, AI still sometimes leaves out important words like not, which could mean the difference between a successful procedure or electrocution or amputation. Automated QC, I'm suspecting this is an automatic quality estimation evaluation, might not notice this. True, if you know that as a fact that this is a risk, list the risk. Okay, you're referring to the research. Yeah, I can confirm that internal research confirmed this. Academic research, I'm not sure if we've already seen papers on this yet. Yeah, I can confirm that doing your own. I've heard this at Lockworld a couple of times also from the client side saying this. I think there's also some academic papers out there, but don't nail me down on that question. Okay, so you've seen bad term bases, James. I'm sorry to hear that.
The ones in Germany are almost always bad.
Well, again, that's a risk assessment that you can do. Term base is for the trash can, so either fix that or, you know, have the human involvement unnegotiable at this point. Client will be receptive to, yeah, okay. I see that you're having some internal communication here. So I'm, I agree. James should be writing a book around FUs, and I'm not using the sales term here in our industry. Okay, so oh, that's a nice one. A nice quote on slide 19. That was the Kirchhoff quote, I'm assuming. What is my slide 19? Oh, you mean slide 18, I guess. But it has number 19. See, this is when economists create PowerPoint. But it kind of assumes that there is one fixed owner on the side of the client. Has that been your experience, that clients can have several people involved in the process and quality doesn't mean the same thing to all of them? Yeah, that's the whole point of my presentation and of reflecting on this topic for 20 plus years, is that actually people struggle to define what they mean in terms of quality. Yeah. And that they also think, so this is why I also brought this up, that this is a fixed North Star that never moves, which is not true, right? So we've seen, for example, if you look at machine translation being used in social media, I think the acceptance rate when the quality of the output was low was also low. So people would opt in more often for the original text to be shown, right? To not be translated. And this has completely switched, right? So a lot of people are completely fine of having automated translation in social media. They don't bother. Some social media doesn't even use disclaimers for this anymore. And which, I mean, for us as a user is sometimes not so nice when you kind of like, this is weird, like nobody talks that way. And then you just see this little button somewhere, oh, this has been automatically translated, or, you know, like we even have voice morphing in different languages in Instagram now. But this is absolutely fine, you know, like if this is something that does the job for you and your risk is low or non-existent to do that and to use that, go ahead. Or if you also have endless funds for a quality of automatic translation with it, which is, you know, good enough to fit that purpose, which is also something that, you know, companies need to take into consideration, that what we are seeing on Instagram and Facebook did cost them quite a few $million to get there. Okay, so Darren says, our experience of client is that they have always had limited time and interest to discuss translation at all. True, but they are trying to engage in discussion on a matrix of content types would meet some very blank faces. This has only worsened with AI. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. This has actually changed for me with AI, where they will literally consider any content, including safe critical, for free AI translations. Okay, so my experience is the opposite, to be honest. Then again, I'm mostly operating in Europe, and I'm, you know, making a point with my clients to have a deep discussion on these topics. And on the contrary, I've seen that with AI, since they really want to implement this and they are challenging their own workflows, they are more open to having these discussions with me. So maybe my bubble didn't give me that one yet, but maybe I come across them at one point. To be honest, also, if somebody wants to buy from me and just wants to have free AI translation, I'm telling you, you take the risk and you come back whenever taking that risk was not a good idea. Okay, so maybe you want me, Steffen and Karian, to share my last slide where people can see my LinkedIn, or are we fine? Yeah?
Please feel free to do so. Yeah.
I would just like to know what people meant with went through their answer, because a lot of them answered other at the moment. And I
Oh,
think
yeah, true. Thank you.
I'd
Yeah,
really like
maybe
to know.
other
And
because
then
they
James
are.
also has a question, but that's sitting politely holding his hand like a polite person. But I jumped in. Sorry, James.
Okay,
You
I
want me to
actually
jump
also
in?
do like that operational complexity is a showstopper, because that is actually true. But yeah. So maybe Karian's question can be answered. What is other? No? No one?
You can also write it in the, if you don't want to unmute yourself, you're more than welcome to write it in the chat. I was just wondering because if other one, and I'd like to know what other is. But anyway.
Okay, maybe we'll find out next time around. So I'm just sharing this really quickly with you.
Perfect.
If you want to follow me, you can also follow me on LinkedIn. Actually, I didn't put this here, but there's just one Dominique Puls, I think. So it's not going to be so difficult to find me.
We linked you a couple of times there.
Yeah, you did. Thanks. And also, if you're interested in automatic quality estimation, we have an ebook that we published on our product specifically, which is working a bit different to what the TMS providers are doing. Not saying that this is the best one, it needs to be fit for purpose. So in some cases, it is fit for purpose. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, we have some 3 minutes left, I believe, in the planned time for maybe additional questions.
There's James
I
still
saw that
raising his
James
hand.
raised his hand. The man who needs
Okay,
to
one
write a
thing
book.
I was going to say that involves the purpose of a translation that the client never even thinks of because they just say, I want this in English. And it happened to me doing translations for a large tool manufacturing company. Their English terminology is almost, even on the consumer packaging, is almost unintelligible, even to native speakers. But the Czech and German originals that they were sending me were totally clear. So finally I asked the project manager to ask the client, who's this for? They said, well, it's for translation into the Baltic languages. So the English was just a stepping stone. And so I had to realize the purpose of it had to be total clarity so that the people in the Baltics would understand it rather than reflecting the actual corporate terminology.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those things out there. And what I always try to do when I try to understand what, the purpose of transforming a certain piece into another language is that I'm actually actively asking them to, get me in touch with the people who are creating the content and why they've created it and for what audience they've created it. And if possible to, share, style guides and tone of voice, if there are any, to analyze and to do an assessment. So I'm in the lucky position that we do have an internal linguistic team at Seprotec, so full-time linguists working for us, and not just 3, but like a bunch of them, like 50. And then I can give them that tone of voice guides and tell them, okay, like, is there anything in there that doesn't make sense in your language or in the cultural context or whatever, so that we can guide our clients through that, like just, throwing something over the fence and hoping for the best will most probably not do the job, but we're the experts to provide that kind of insights you can't expect from somebody putting monolingual content to know all these ins and outs. That's why we exist as an industry, or still do exist. Let's see how long. Maybe at one point risk will be so low that they don't need us anymore. The British English.
The British English.
Unfortunately, I've lost my accent. My mom would be so horrified right now.
Okay, so do we have any more questions? Is everybody happy? Do you feel more informed? At least I was able to share with you some economical terms. Perfect.
I think if everyone has got everything that they need,
Maybe
I would just
Karian,
like
two words I didn't include
Yeah.
here. So as Karian and Steffen mentioned, I'm also part of the German chapter of Women in Localization. So if you haven't come across Women in Localization, you can find both the website as well as several LinkedIn profiles. I'm personally in the German chapter, so I'm very happy if you follow the German chapter on LinkedIn. And maybe also if you register with Women in Localization, which by the way is for free, and you get a ton of cool content there around our industry, which is shared freely, then my whole amazing German volunteering team will like it. And we also do a couple of events sometimes in real life and sometimes also webinars. So I would be more than happy if you could check it out.
Perfect.
That's all.
Thank you. Is that all? It's like back to the studio.
Back to the studio. Back to Karian and
Love it.
Steffen.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining the Lingo Systems Tech Talk today with Dominic. Thank you so much also to you for sharing all of this with us. And that's the whole point of the Tech Talks, to get all of the information to everyone. And it's just knowledge sharing. It's nothing else. Have a great day. And I will see everyone at the next Tech Talk, which will be online soon. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Sprechen.